Why, good morning, good night, everybody. It's economics time with Phil, teacher. We have to talk about central banks. Central banks. Central banks are a fairly mystified organization. Now, what they teach you in school is that here's the government, and the government can't print its own money. So it has the central bank print the money and then lend it to the government. The central bank also sets the interest rates. And the central bank has to be independent from the government because it's good for the market. And that's what they teach you in school. Of course, this is a lie, and the people who are teaching this are just going with the flow to keep their jobs. So, who runs the central banks? In the United States, the chairman of the central bank is Brnanke. Brnanke. In Canada, the king of the central bank is Mark Carney. Mark Carney. These two men are some of the richest men in the world. They run the largest printing presses of money, and they control the entire money supply. They can take as much money as they want. They can print as much money as they want. They can give it to anyone under any circumstances. And there's nothing that you can do about it. These two men are the richest men in the world. Now, the interest rate policy. Interest rate policy. The interest rate policy is set by the central bank. The central bank says interest rates are going to be 1%. Or even 0% right now. Okay, so that's their policy. Now, what are the interest rates? The interest rates. If you hear interest rates, what that means in the news is the target overnight rate. The target overnight rate. The target overnight rate is the interest rate that banks lend to one another after the business hours close. So it's like at night. The banks, they have to square up their trades, and so they lend money to each other to square up their trades. Now, the target overnight rate means there's a range. Because, it's not going to be exact when they start lending the money. So they'd say the target overnight range is between 0 and 0.25%. That is the target range. And the banks have to lend overnight between that range. Otherwise, they violate their regulations. So, the target overnight rate is really a control that the central bank has over the banks. Now, what if the interest rates go down? Like, let's say they're at 5% and they cut them to 1%. What is that called? That's called easing. Easing. So sometimes you hear the Fed is easing. If the Fed is easing, it means he's dropping the rates. He's cutting the rates down. So, the opposite of easing is called tightening. Tightening. Tightening means you're increasing the rate from 5% to 6%, 7%, 10%. Who knows how high you'd tighten the rate.